Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going back in time, back to the 1940s,
Hmm.
to Chicago. Imagine a city just gripped by fear, where a killer was leaving these cryptic messages written in lipstick.
A killer who became known as, well, the lipstick killer.
The lipstick killer, and you provided us with all these sources, court documents, police records. We even have some historical accounts so we can really dig into the evidence.
And the mystery
Yeah.
surrounding William Heirens,
Surrounding William Heirens.
the lipstick killer.
Yeah. It's a case that has fascinated people for decades.
Oh, absolutely. And for good reason. I mean, it's not just a whodunit. It's a story about post-war society.
Yeah.
About a young man with a really complex past.
Yeah.
And a justice system that's grappling with evolving forensic science and interrogation techniques.
When I was going through the sources that you provided, the thing that really struck me first was Heirens' childhood. It was anything but idyllic. We're talking impoverished family, constant arguments between his parents.
Yeah.
The reports even mentioned that he would often escape to the streets just to find some peace and quiet.
Yeah, and that escape kind of led him down this path of petty crime. He started stealing as a teenager.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that it wasn't really about the money.
Right.
He would often just stash the stolen goods. It was almost as if the thrill was in the act itself.
Oh, wow.
A way of exerting control.
Yeah.
In a world where he felt powerless.
That makes you wonder if it was a cry for attention, or was it, a way to kind of lash out against the world?
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, was it, a world that seemed to be stacked against him?
Yeah.
And this pattern that we see, right, this rebellion,
Yeah.
intertwined with his intelligence, it continued. He was sent to reform school. He excelled academically there.
Wow.
And then he gets accepted into the University of Chicago.
It's like this was no ordinary delinquent.
No,
This kid had potential.
definitely.
He had a bright future, maybe.
Yeah,
But, as we know, things took kind of a dark turn.
they did.
June 1945, Josephine Ross is found murdered in her apartment, stabbed to death.
Yeah.
There were no signs of forced entry. No valuables were taken. Witnesses saw a dark-haired man fleeing the scene, but they could never, positively identify him.
Right. And this first murder, while brutal, it didn't immediately spark citywide panic. It was the second murder 6 months later that really ignited the fear.
Francis Brown.
Francis Brown, yeah.
This is where that infamous lipstick message comes into play, right?
Likely.
For heaven's sakes, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself. I mean, reading that even all these years later, sends chills down my spine.
Yeah.
The message, it was scrawled on her apartment wall in lipstick, and it turned the case from a police investigation
Right.
into a media sensation. It fed public fear, and it just ramped up the pressure on the police.
To deliver results. And the newspapers, they started calling him the lipstick killer,
Yeah.
a moniker that stuck
Right.
and just added to the public's unease.
It's like something straight out of a film noir, right?
Exactly.
And with that message, Heirens, who was already on the police radar for burglaries,
Right.
quickly becomes a prime suspect. But before we even get to Heirens' arrest, we had to talk about the city's reaction and how it impacted the investigation.
Right.
Things weren't exactly by the book, were they?
Not by today's standards, no.
Yeah.
I mean, Chicago was in the grip of a full-blown panic. The murders, the message, the media frenzy, it all created this atmosphere where fear and speculation just overshadowed reason
Yeah.
and due process.
One example that really stood out to me in the court documents you provided was the case of Hector Voberg, the janitor.
Yeah, Ferber. His story is just a stark reminder of the dangers of tunnel vision in these high-profile cases.
Yeah.
He was wrongfully accused, subjected to brutal interrogation. Wow. Simply because he fit a vague description.
Right.
And he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It's a chilling reminder, I think, of how easily things can go wrong when the pressure to find answers overrides the commitment to justice.
Absolutely.
But then things escalated even further, right?
They did. The kidnapping of 6-year-old Suzanne Degnan in January of 1946, it took the city's fear to a whole new level. This wasn't just another murder.
Right.
This was a child abduction, a ransom note, a series of phone calls to the family.
It's like every parent's worst nightmare.
Who was?
And when Suzanne's dismembered body was found, it just intensified the pressure on the police to an almost unbearable level.
It did. They were chasing every lead. Some more credible than others. They even launched a nationwide manhunt for Marine wrongly accused Sidney Sherman.
Wow.
The Degnan case with its horrific details and the media attention, it created a pressure cooker for
Yep.
investigators. They were determined to find the perpetrator. And that determination sometimes led them down paths that, looking back, were questionable at best.
So, with the city on edge and the police desperate for a break in the case, William Heirens, who was 17 years old at the time, gets arrested in June of 1946.
Right,
Not for murder, but for burglary.
right.
But as we'll see, this seemingly unrelated arrest would change the course of the lipstick killer investigation forever.
It would.
Aarons's arrest for burglary, it was certainly a turning point, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the police, they saw him as a potential suspect in the murders.
Right.
And from what I've read in these court documents that you provided, things got pretty intense.
They did.
Heirens was subjected to like 6 days of just grueling interrogation,
Yeah.
sleep deprivation, psychological pressure,
Yeah.
even allegations of physical abuse.
Wow.
It was a far cry from the interrogation standards we have today.
And then there's the whole truth serum controversy. The police administered sodium pentothal to Heirens without his consent.
Right.
And under its influence, he started talking about an alternate personality named George,
Right.
who was responsible for the murders.
The use of sodium pentothal or any so-called truth serum,
Huh.
I mean, it's highly problematic. It doesn't actually induce truth-telling.
Right.
It more induces a state of suggestibility and confusion. So the reliability of any confession obtained under its influence, well, it's highly questionable, to say the least.
So you're saying that Aarons's confession, where he blames this George persona, could have been a result of the drug and the coercive interrogation tactics, not a genuine admission of guilt.
It's definitely a possibility that needs to be considered. And what makes it even more difficult to assess is that the original transcript of Aarons's interrogation, well, it's disappeared.
What?
All we have are secondhand accounts, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation
Yeah.
and doubt.
It's like a key piece of the puzzle is missing.
Exactly.
But even with the confession, there are issues with the physical evidence too, right?
Yeah.
The fingerprint on the Degnan ransom note was
Right.
presented as a smoking gun. But there were concerns about how the note was handled and the timing of the fingerprint discoveries.
Yeah, the fingerprint evidence, while seemingly damning at the time, it has since been subject to a lot of scrutiny.
Oh, wow.
Experts have raised questions about the clarity of the prints, the possibility of contamination, even whether they were even sufficient to make a definitive match.
Right.
Forensic science was still in its early stages back then.
Then there's that smudged fingerprint on the door jamb at the Brown crime scene.
Right.
It was initially deemed inconclusive, but then later matched to Aaron's.
Yeah.
But again, how that print was collected and
Yeah.
its overall quality have been called into question.
It's these inconsistencies, these nagging doubts about the evidence,
Yeah.
that fuel the ongoing debate about Aaron's guilt. You have the confession, which we know obtained under highly questionable circumstances, and then you have physical evidence that, upon closer examination, doesn't quite add up.
And we can't forget about the missing knife, right?
The knife.
Aarons confessed to discarding a hunting knife, but the one found by reporters turned out to belong to someone else entirely. It just adds another layer of mystery to this already complicated case.
It's a detail that certainly raises eyebrows. I mean, if Aarons truly committed the murders, wouldn't the police have found the actual murder weapon? The one he claimed to have discarded?
Right.
It's a discrepancy that has never been fully explained.
So despite all of these lingering doubts, Aarons ends up pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty and is sentenced to 3 life terms.
Yeah.
What's fascinating to me is that once he's behind bars, he kind of transforms into this model prisoner.
He did.
He earns a college degree, becomes a skilled tradesman, even helps other inmates. It's a far cry from the image of the lipstick killer.
Aaron's life in prison it's a study in contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, you have a man convicted of horrific crimes.
Right.
On the other, you have someone who, by all accounts, dedicated himself to rehabilitation
Yeah.
and to helping others. It makes you wonder if he was genuinely trying to atone for his past,
Right.
or if he was simply just trying to make the best of a bad situation while maintaining his innocence.
And he never gave up on trying to clear his name, right?
He didn't.
Aarons continually sought clemency, recanted his confession, and pointed to the flawed evidence and interrogation tactics used against him. His case garnered a lot of attention,
It did.
particularly from those Northwestern University law students
Yeah.
who presented a pretty compelling case for his
Yeah.
innocence back in 2002.
That 2002 clemency petition, that was a turning point in the public perception of the Heirens case. It brought to light the potential police misconduct, the coerced confession,
Right.
and the mishandled evidence. It wasn't just Heirens and his supporters claiming his innocence anymore.
Yeah.
It was a group of respected legal scholars presenting a well-researched and thoroughly documented argument.
But even with all of that, clemency was denied.
It was.
Heirens died in prison in 2012, still maintaining his innocence until his final breath.
He did.
It's a tragic end to a case that continues to haunt Chicago
It does.
and to fascinate those who are interested in true crime. It's a case that stays with you, you know?
Oh.
All these sources you provided, and even after going through all the court documents and the historical accounts, there's still this cloud of uncertainty
There is.
surrounding William Heirens and the Lipstick Killer murders.
It's a prime example of how a single event can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, was he a cunning criminal? Did he manage to outsmart the system?
Yeah.
Or was he a victim of circumstance?
Right.
A young man just caught in the gears of a flawed justice system.
That's what makes this case so fascinating and frankly so disturbing.
It is.
The evidence is there, but it's contradictory. You have the confession, but it's tainted by coercion and these questionable interrogation tactics.
Right.
You have the fingerprints, but doubts linger about their accuracy and reliability.
Exactly. It's a case that really challenges us to think critically about how we interpret evidence, how we weigh competing narratives, and how we grapple with the very nature of truth.
Yeah.
Can we ever truly know with absolute certainty what happened
Yeah.
all those years ago?
It's a question that kind of lingers long after you put down the case files.
It does.
What do you believe? Based on everything we've discussed, where do you land on the question of William Heirens' guilt or innocence?
I think it's important to remember that there are no easy answers in a case like this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the evidence is complex, and there are valid arguments to be made on both sides.
Right.
I think what matters most is that you, having explored these sources, you can form your own informed opinion.
And that's what the deep dive is all about, right?
It is.
We're not here to provide definitive answers.
No.
We're here to kind of guide you through the complexities of the case and equip you with the knowledge and context you need to make your own judgments.
Exactly.
But the Heirens case, it isn't just about one man and his alleged crimes. It raises some larger questions, too.
It does. It forces us to confront the potential for error, the influence of media and public pressure on investigations, and the importance of due process and the presumption of innocence.
These are themes that resonate just as strongly today as they did back in the 1940s.
Absolutely.
It makes you think, if similar crimes were committed today, how would they be handled? Would the outcome be different with modern forensic techniques, DNA evidence, stricter interrogation protocols?
It's a thought-provoking question.
Oh,
Well, while forensic science has advanced dramatically, I mean, we still see cases where innocent people are convicted. We still see where biases and systemic flaws can lead to miscarriages of justice. The Heirens case, in many ways, serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that the pursuit of justice it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
It's a constant striving for fairness and truth.
So as we conclude our deep dive into this perplexing case of William Heirens, we'll leave you with this final thought. If this case has piqued your interest, there's a wealth of information out there.
Oh, yeah.
Court documents, trial transcripts, newspaper archives, it's all waiting to be uncovered. Maybe you'll even discover a detail, a clue, a piece of evidence that sheds some new light on this enduring mystery.
And as you continue your own exploration, consider those broader implications.
Yeah.
How has our understanding of criminal psychology evolved?
Right.
What safeguards have we put in place to prevent coerced confessions?
Yeah.
How do we balance the need for public safety
Right.
with the protection of individual rights?
Because ultimately, the Heirens case, it isn't just about one man's fate. It's about the enduring quest for justice, the pursuit of truth, and the recognition that even in the face of overwhelming evidence, doubt can and should persist.
Absolutely.